concerns some of us very actively and the others not quite as actively, but we all know that the human being is an imperfect creature. So we're all at times nursing certain problems comes under the nature of healing. I'd like to introduce a few thoughts into the healing work that give more of a substance so that we can pursue it with more scientific accuracy before we lose the spirit. Jesus, of course, was a perfect healer. And we may wonder why and how. We know the Christ should be. But the Christ also had certain methods which he was trying to suggest that we use. And usually all the people who are interested in healing have a talent for it and can effect some healings. Some go as high as 75%. We'd like them to understand the healing from a different perspective. Maybe there are 20 healers among you, but I think the rest of you are just as interested as the healers, because when you get a problem, you want healing. Although many of you will try it yourself, you'll find that you can't do it in some cases. And basically, as spiritual students, we should be able to know the principles that we're trying to follow. The first step is your spiritual consciousness. We don't heal with the material consciousness. Every time we try it, we find it doesn't work. It doesn't last. It doesn't hit the desired area. It takes too long. The patient just gives up. He says, where's the healing? Yet there are some who can do it well. The first thing to remember on healing is that you have to have a spiritual consciousness. That's in spiritual healing, in infinite way healing. Without a spiritual consciousness, it's like a doctor without tools. So, building your spiritual consciousness is step number one. And that's a daily process. Every day of your life, you have to increase your capacity to reach the spirit of your own being, and then the spirit of your customers or your clients or whatever you call them. So you've got something in your throat, or your client has. How do you enter that man's throat? You're not going in, you're not taking a pair of forceps or pliers or whatever you go into the throat with. You're going in as a spiritual self. And you're recognizing his spiritual self. And it's painless. You have no map. You know the general direction of where you're going. You know what you're trying to do, but somehow the cough doesn't go away. So you try again. And it depends on what type of healer you are. We know some who repeat, You're not well, you're not sick, you're not this, you're not that. And some of it has an effect on them, but it's not a permanent way of healing. It's not a kind of healing that you're proud of as something you've done. And it doesn't last usually. In spiritual healing, we have two things to consider. First, you have been building your spiritual consciousness. That means you can get into it pretty fast, out of your human consciousness. And of course, if you plan to heal on a permanent basis, then you don't even have a human consciousness, or at least it's a minimal part of your being, and you're working on lesser and lesser and lesser of it, because people are coming to you for the spirit. So then you've got a spiritual consciousness, but you've got the problem nevertheless. And you've got to face it in such a way that you might say that you have a direct access to where the problem is to be treated. You're not missing. And by that I mean the whole patient is the problem. He's separated from his spirit. And you've got to learn how to get him back into a oneness with his spirit. And that's all it takes. To get him into a oneness with his spirit. But you can only do it if you are in oneness with your spirit. And if you are, and he is, there can be a meeting of the two minds into one, with a possible result that you find the Christ healing. You find the Christ perfection in his invisible being. Now, I want to introduce the idea of a spiritual body. Most times we're healing blindly. We're just taking the individual and we're saying, well, I'll go to work on it and I'll be quiet and I'll be still and I'll try to contact your spirit. You want to know that there is a spiritual body that is right where the patient is, right where you are. And strangely enough, there can be nothing wrong with it. I don't care how ill the patient is, the spiritual body is not. It can't have a dent in it. It can't have a flaw. The spiritual body of the patient is the body of Christ. You don't have to do anything about it. You have to know it. You can't improve it. And you don't have to worry about what's wrong with the patient, because it isn't wrong. Anything that he's got, he only thinks he has. You say, well, he thinks he's got a pain in the side. And you know better. He not only hasn't got a pain in the side, he hasn't got a side. You've got to denude him. You've got to see him as he is. He's the perfect spirit without any physical attributes. Every patient you ever have has no physical attributes. That's a hard one to remember until you get into the swing of it. So you're not trying to improve him. You're trying to recognize that this is a spiritual man or a spiritual woman. And if he comes into your perception in such a way that he responds then he will get well. And he'll think, well, you're a marvelous healer. You made my rib go back into place, and you made my lungs do a certain thing. But you're not doing anything. You're just recognizing that he is perfect. And you've got to know how to recognize it. So healing is quite simple. And I'd like you to try to learn it if you haven't, because many things you can treat yourself. You can take any accident you have and you can treat it in such a way that the problem is resolved. You can take serious things and treat them. Sometimes you're not able to do that, so you hire another practitioner who's able to do it. The point is that you can be healed if someone is there who knows that you are perfect to start with. They can't heal what seems to be wrong because there's nothing wrong. They may not discuss this with you. You've got to know, I am God's perfect creature. Sometimes, in the knowledge that you are, you don't need any help from anyone. I'd like to discuss a few of the healings in here, because Jesus had a way of doing them so perfectly that if we could get into his perception of how he did it and what he did, and sort of try to duplicate it, you might find a great deal of spiritual education. Let's look at one. I've written down. Let's see. It's the boy at Nain. This boy was about 18 years old. I don't know who did him in, but it ended up as he was walking, and next thing you know, he was flat on his back, and his mother, all the cousins, uncles, brothers formed a procession, which was a sad-looking thing, and they solemnly walked toward the graveyard with his body. The disciples were going another way, but their paths crossed intentionally, and now Jesus was going to work with this boy from the city of Nain. Now, mind you, Jesus is quite aware of the fact that whatever seems to have happened has not happened. Nothing ever happens in the material world. In the spiritual world, which is all there is, perfection is. In the material world, somebody thinks he's suffering, or she thinks she's suffering, and here he is, he's dead. And the Master is going to raise him. I don't know what we can get out of it for ourselves, but you can see that he wouldn't have raised him if he didn't want us to know it. And if he wanted us to know it, that means that other people can be raised. And so we may learn as we go into this that man may seem dead, but if he's not gone too far so that he's an outcast or cast aside, if he's not through with this incarnation, he may be ready to embed himself in the next one. Someone who knows what he's doing can see that he is a living creature. It came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain. Many of his disciples went with him, and much people. Now where he was come nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And much people, says much people of the city, was with her. Now she's a widow. Do you get the significance of widow? It's quite simple. Whoever has no God connection is called a widow. I mean, that's a spiritual way of saying it. So she didn't know anything about the God connection. She was a widow. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, weep not. Now, how was she going to stop weeping if her son was dead? She had a reason to weep. Weep not. He was probably telling her that there's a reason to weep not. I'm going to soon show it to you. I'm going to show you that the boy isn't dead. He couldn't say that. He'd have to show that. But anyway, weep not. You're in for a surprise, just like our friend the other day with the resurrection. And he came and touched the bier. They had bore him, stood still, and he said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. Now, that sounds quite strange. Here's a boy being carried in a coffin. Jesus comes up and says, young man, arise. Now, if he was going to go into some prestidigitation or some analysis of the situation, or something else, you would hear about it. But what he did was what he said he did. He said, young man, arise. That's all. What happened? He that was dead sat up. The man just says to a dead man, arise. And he arises. And you and I must figure out how he did it. first of all, I was asked to do this once a long time ago. I didn't succeed, but I wish I had known more then than I knew now. My excuse was that this man wanted to die, and I can't countermand his desire. I think that's true, too. If a person commits suicide, you don't have the ability to raise him up. But if he doesn't commit suicide, if he didn't want to die, you have the ability to raise him up. And that may sound like a tough job, and it is. But here we are, seeing it with our own eyes about a boy. He was 18, incidentally. Jesus came right up and said, "Young man, arise." And he arose. How could he do this? He had no power. He didn't hypnotize him up. And you've got to know how he did it. It's important that we all know exactly how he did it. I told you at the start of this seminar that no man has ever died. You'll find it's true. No matter as long as you live, you'll find it's true. This man had not died. Ostensibly he had. To all appearances, he was dead. He probably had a heart that stopped ticking, so forth. His bodily functions stopped. He was, as a doctor would pronounce him, dead. But he wasn't dead. There was no trick about it. He was dead, but he was spiritually alive. All right? That's the word, spiritually alive. Now, Jesus is going to work on his spirit. He just completely ignores the physical element. He bypasses it completely. Now, what makes this boy still alive? You've got to know. He has a spiritual body, and you have a spiritual body. Everyone has a spiritual body that cannot die. We never knew that one time. Maybe some of us didn't know it until now. But we all have a spiritual body that can never die. Even when they cast us into the ground, throw the sand over us, we still have a spiritual body that cannot die. And it's funny that you don't have an individual spiritual body. You have the one spiritual body, which is infinite. And the one who's above ground alive has that same body, and you're dead under the ground, and you have that same body. And that's the simple truth, and it's incredible. One infinite body, our pure spirit, and it never changes. It never changes. So that's the first step for Jesus. He didn't even have to think about it. He knows this. It's an automatic thing with him. This boy is alive in his spiritual body. So he goes up to him and says, "Arise, young man." That's all he did. That doesn't mean everybody is going to arise who you walk up to him and say, "Arise, young man." You have to have the ability to live in the Spirit. Because here, the Spirit is meeting the Spirit. The one Spirit is consolidating itself as one Spirit. When he says to the boy, "Arise," he is the one who is making the boy rise. He sees this as one Spirit. It's Jesus who is affecting the rise. Jesus who is rising in the boy. Now, what you would do in a case like this is you would know that there is one spirit, now you would anyway, and he is that spirit and you are. You start meditating. You wouldn't say anything to him. You'd meditate, and meditate, and meditate. You might have to meditate for 2 days. You might get results quicker. You have to know that he is spirit, that you are spirit, and that his spiritual body can never change. But you must reach him with spirit. All your brain work won't do any good. It's not easy. You've got to learn how to live in the spirit to do it. Jesus not only lived in the spirit, he was the spirit. There was nothing extra. He didn't have 98% spirit and 2% human mind or anything of that sort. He was spirit. And you're going to learn how to be spirit. It'll take quite a while before you'll learn how to lose the human qualities. But you'll find that when you're spirit, well, you may not even be here at that time because you graduate. You won't have to say to the boy, rise. But anyway, Jesus did, to show us that the way we affect the healing is to know this is the living Son of God who appears to be dead. And I am the living Son of God. And we are one Son. Sounds incredible, and we can't duplicate it because the case hasn't arisen yet. But you may find someone who has got the job, and he may fail because he doesn't know that this lad or this person who's appearing dead, maybe a 6-year-old, maybe a little baby, his spiritual body is all there is of him. And you can think that, oh, he's only 2 years old, he can't have him developed yet. It doesn't have to develop. He's got the same spiritual body we all have. That is what he always has, even when he's no longer a little physical boy. Now that's the biggest thing to know about spiritual healing. And it figures in every healing. Even the healer doesn't go through all this. But he is trained to reach the point of spiritual awareness and oneness. That's how he gets the results. Let's go through it all and see what he says. And the Lord saw the widow. He had compassion on her and said, weep not. And he came, touched the boy, the bier, and they that bare him stood by, stood back, stood still. And he said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead. Is that it? And began to speak. And he delivered him to his mother. became a fear on all. They had seen a miracle. They didn't know what to feel. They couldn't quite adjust to that. And he glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, and that God has visited his people. That would be a mighty deed. When you think of them crucifying this man, it's the most insane thing that could have happened. They ought to put him up on a podium and carry him around, and, you know. Anyway, that's the man they tried to crucify. And this rumor of him went forth throughout the all Judea, and throughout all region around. This man walked up to a boy who was dead. Stand up, he said. The boy stands up. Do you know what happened? It had to have a reason to happen. If it's an example for us, then it means just what it says. The boy was not dead, although medical science would have said he was. He didn't give him any time to respond to his statement. He just said, "Get up." The boy got up. So you think now that this must be possible. But who's going to perform it? Medical science won't. Jesus isn't around. Well, how about you and me? How about us taking the job, whenever we see anything of this character, we'll catch the man in his spiritual identity. And if he doesn't happen to be dead, just sick, we'll still catch him in his spiritual identity, because that's the secret of it. The knowing that this is living spirit I'm talking to, not a dead boy. Now, how would you go about this? The person comes to you for help, and you're a healer. What's the problem? I tell you the problem. The first thing you do is you put that problem in the wastebasket. I mean it. You listen very attentively, because the man has a right to tell you what his problem is. But if you buy it, you've lost him. You cannot buy his problem. You've got to see that spirit has no problem. And this is spirit, no matter what he says. Sometimes a cure will take a year or two. And you'll have to go through it every day. You'll have to think this hurts and hurts and hurts. You never think that he's spirit. You never heard the word. That's how deficient the world is in the truth. Now, we should know at least that he is spirit, because we've got to know that we are spirit. That's essential. Spiritual living is living in the spirit. So there's a boy coming. They say he's sick and he's this and he's that, but I know he's alive and he's spirit. That's the first big step. You see what an advance that is over healing methods? And how it makes everything possible for just an ordinary man to be a healer. We really can all be healers. It'll take a certain amount of capacity to get inside this consciousness as spirit myself and to live in the spirit and to touch this man's spirit with my spirit so that the two are one. That's where the ingenuity and the talent and the experience fall. Just recognize that you don't have an unsurpassable problem when something serious happens. What you've got is to find someone who knows what the problem is and how to handle it. Now, there are no physical knives to use, nothing to sedate the man. There's no delay. He doesn't have to go on suffering. And it's not a big expense. And I know it won't work the first time. It might not work the first 1,000 times. But when it does work, if you've been doing it the way you should, you find it works on everything. Everything. Now, as I say, Jesus wouldn't be doing this for any other reason that is important. He wants the world to know that healings happen of even dead people. And he wants you to know that the dead people arise because they're not dead. When he says to the young man, arise, he is using spiritual words. The substance of his words is spirit. Are you going to practice so that when you speak spirit? Can you fill your words with the spirit? Because when you do, you will say arise, and that will dehypnotize the patient right there. So one man will say arise, just a mortal statement. Another man, deep in the spirit, will say it and will cut the cords that bind the man, cut the hypnosis. Isn't that wonderful? What spirit opens for us? How this is lain in the Bible for 2,000 years. We have not been aware of how. Stop a storm the same way. He gives a girl back her life the same way. She passed out in a coma. You see, he is spirit, and spirit does the work. The spirit that he is isn't this big or that big or that big. He speaks in the spiritual universe is what he speaks from. When you are spirit, you will speak from the spiritual universe. And I'm not talking just so that I can amuse anybody. I'm expecting you to be spirit. I work it hard myself. It just doesn't come easy. You've got to keep working at it, working at it, working at it. Until you lose a sense of mortality and you feel, well, I'm somewhat higher than I was. It takes discussions like this to make you aware of the power of spirit, and I find that in the discussion we all seem to get a little further into it, so that it might be possible someday to achieve the spiritual recognition that we won't be just a voice saying, I say arise. It will be spirit saying arise. That's where the difference is. He that was dead, set up. There came a fear on all. They glorified God, saying that a great man, a great prophet, is raised up among us. I would have said we could have put a flag out and marched the city, sounded his name for 1,000,000 years. If we knew of a man today who did that, more or less, one among us may be that man. Let's look at another one. The girl in a coma. 22. It's right nearby. This is slightly different. As you recall, no one in all of the city could heal him. And the Father appeared before Jesus, said, heal my daughter. And Jesus left where he was and followed the man to his house. Comes in, sees a girl lying there, just a frail little girl. She's in a bed. There's all these people wandering around. They call them, they're paid people to do that. And they're acting out all of her sorrowful nature. And they're doing something to keep the spirits away, the spirits that are the dead spirits. And they're wailing, and Jesus banishes them. Why? Because the wailing isn't going to heal the girl, it's just going to raise the roof out of the place. He gets rid of everybody who's there. The only one left is her father, Jairus, but he has his disciples over here, as if to say, "Lala, watch, fellas, here's what I'm going to do." Now, if you remember, she had a problem that they couldn't decipher. They didn't know why she couldn't breathe or speak, what brought her ill, and then she lapsed into this coma. I guess he wasn't saying much for doctors at the time, but nothing could heal her. Nothing. Now again, Jesus took her as a perfect spiritual being. I'm emphasizing that. I want you to remember that every patient coming to you, everybody who says I'm sick, is sick only in his concept of it. That his spirit is not sick. Spirit can't be sick. And spirit is the identity of everyone who comes in a material form. Doesn't matter if they're big or small, they're not material. Their substance is invisible spirit. And so you say to yourself, this patient is spirit, perfect spirit. That means he's well. The only thing that's stopping him is the hypnosis of feeling I got diphtheria or this or that. Every patient is hypnotized. And if you're going to be hypnotized too, then there'll be two of you hypnotized and you'll never do them any good. It takes quite a while before you're not frightened by the situation, and you can collect yourself and just quietly know. To walk to the sofa, and I was going through this turmoil in my head. I was absolutely paralyzed, and my feet were dragging. I couldn't even walk. It was horrible. And when I got to the sofa, I fell down. And fortunately, I had some ability to hear. And when he started talking in his unconscious state, I was listening. And he said, I'm not dead, I'm not unconscious, they don't know I'm alive here. This boy talking in his unconscious state. He said, I see them, they don't see me. Then he said a lot of things like that. And I don't know why, I really thought I was listening to the boy. So I thought I'd get on the phone and tell his mother he's not dead. And I started to do that. Then I thought, no, she thinks something's wrong. I think I better wait. So I waited 5 or 6 days, and then I dropped her a letter and told her what I had heard. Well, that was what happened. He really had been speaking in his stupor, in his unconscious state. And I got a call on New Year's Eve. It was 25 to 7. And even though it's long ago, I ran up the steps and I remembered the time because I was just going out. And she was crying. She said, he's well, he's well. And then she said, but he's something else was wrong. And I said, well, don't worry about it. That'll be taken care of. I don't know why I was so confident, but I don't know why. I just was that confident. And so that was taken care of too, whatever it was. And that's what happened to the boy. And it turned out that later, for some reason, he came to me for healing of some little nonsense that he had. And he said, you know, my mother's gung-ho on these healers. Do you know anything like that? I just listened to him. That was a funny situation. And you know, 16 months after that, I got a report that the same boy had been fallen with epilepsy. And for some reason, I said to the woman who called me, I don't know why, I said, in 6 days he'll be over it. And he was. Instinct was just talking, that's all. But that was my first major case. And everybody started calling me. I had 20 cases from that one case. And one of them was 7 boys who were communists. The case of the 7 in Chicago, I think it was, way back when Jane Fonda's husband was one of them, and there were 6 more, and they were all on trial for, I don't know, they had a lot of firecrackers they were shooting off with, bombs. And they were in jail. And the one woman who heard about me handling this other case lived right near the woman, so she called. She says, my son is one of the 7. So I had to work on him. And I don't know why it just happened this way, but there were 2 who were off on the 7, and he was one of them. And he became a playground supervisor. I can't imagine how these things work, but he didn't like to give up his bombs. It was good chemistry. Anyway, that got me interested in healing, because I found that if a fellow can do that with knowing nothing, if I knew something, I'd be sure to learn what to do. I was serious, too. So what I learned was what Joel taught about healing. And I studied it real hard. And he was a superb healer. We never thought any of us would even approximate what he did. Maybe we haven't. But the point is that he taught us, and we learned from Joel what he wanted, and what was necessary, and what was wrong, what was right. And I suppose there's been over 1,000 cases since then. And so everyone who says, I'm going to be a healer, I know what he's going to go through, or what she's going to go through, and those who have done it and have come up with flying colors. It's wonderful to know that people can sit down without any tool, without any anesthetic, without any physical assistance, and do something in their consciousness that can begin to inch this person back to life, or to mobility, or to no pain, just by knowing truth. Not repeating you better, you better, you better, but by knowing the absolute truth. Yet we have such people. Fellows going to Maui is one of them. Tyrus Gruber in Portland is one of them. There are others. These people work hard. They work hard, very hard. They give up a lot. And all they get out of it is somebody telling them, I'm sick or I'm dying. And they love that. The sicker you are, it's wonderful to be able to get you well again. The method is going to be the awareness that no matter how hard you work or how easy you work, no matter what you do, never forget that this person can never be any worse off than he thinks, as he thinks he is. If you could just see his invisible spiritual body as the same as the practitioner's. The one working on the case has the same spiritual body as the one who's ill. We haven't known this all the time. We've gone flying by ear without the knowledge. Sometimes it gets a little eerie. I've had an elderly woman. She was in part of the country and she didn't live there and she was going to die and she knew it. She said, I don't want to die till I get home. She said, I'm not going to die until I get home. And there was a lot of talk, some talk that was not coherent, but some talk that was in the spirit that I could hear. And I followed her across the country. She got home and died. Just the way she said. She was an elderly woman. I don't know if she's here now, but she's somewhere. Cases are very, very strange. You get things from, please grow hair on my head, to, will you restore my virility? And, stuff like that. But the most important is when the patient has a real problem, and especially when the patient is a child. It's good to have this ability because you get a lot of joy in restoring the people to their normal self. Here's another case I've selected. This is about a cripple. It's all right. Well, we're going trying to discuss a different case. I don't find that. I'm sorry. There was this case when Jesus worked on a man who was a cripple. And this man, the only way he knew to get well was to walk out when the water rose up and go in the well. Supposed to have healing waters, like they have in Calistoga or somewhere like that. But he was lame, and so every time he got to the well to immerse himself, he found that others had got in before him, and he couldn't get anywhere. And he knew he had to get in that well. Well, when Jesus came along, he looked at this man, and he had been crippled for a long time, something like 39 years. And Jesus said something to the effect of, "Can I help you?" Well, the man says, "I go out there to get into the water, the healing water, and when I get there, it's just not there anymore. I'm crippled. I can't get there fast enough." Jesus, by this time, had sized up what was happening. The man thought he had his hypnosis about what he had to do. And even though he'd been lame for 39 years, Jesus looked at him, knew the truth of it. The spiritual body was perfect. That's what I'm impressing you with. The spiritual body was perfect. And the man walked. Now there's an interesting case there, because all of these cripples were seated where there were 5. The 5 was emphasized, sort of a cave with 5 sides to it. What they're telling you is that the man had 5 senses, and that everyone who's crippled thinks he's crippled because of his 5 senses. And that's the hypnosis. My sense of motion. I see an accident, that's my sense of sight, so forth. Always the 5 senses. He takes the man out of his 5 senses, doesn't do a thing. Maybe he touches him and looks at him. Nothing ostensibly in the visible, and yet the man walks. All his healings were like this. Didn't matter what it was, what it appeared to be. Shall I continue, or would you rather rest? This is a throat problem. Why don't we all do it together? And you've got to be exposed to the healing for your own good, I think. And I think if we all concentrate on the basic principle we can help this woman, and we can see it right in front of us. We don't even have to know who she is, but she's got a heavy throat, and I'd like to see her take it off, right off her hands, by finding our spiritual selfhood first. And let's try it. Maybe a little difficult. We're trying now to find our spiritual selfhood, and as we make our progress, we're going to feel something inside ourselves. You learn how to dismiss thought immediately. What do you want to know about this woman's throat? Absolutely nothing. What you have to know is that she is spirit and I am spirit. Now, just saying it is not being it. So for days and days you'll be practicing being the Spirit of God. And you remain there in the silence while something deepens inside you. Eventually, you will change consciousness. Some people can do this quickly. You're very fortunate if you arrive at a spiritual reality quickly. But if you don't, you maintain this no thought until you find something growing inside. It comes from a different level than the mind. Your soul. come a moment when you know something has happened to you. You won't be exactly in a human mind. Now, if you're in the right place, you can't think at all. At this point, some people have a tendency to find they are breathing quite heavily. That's good. You're not thinking of a person. You're concentrating on this silence, this depth of silence. There's something that's growing inside your consciousness. Normally, we stay in it until we feel that something has happened. I don't know how you feel it. It's as if something rises in you and has a tendency to say it's finished without talking. You know something is turned over. And so you would stop. And the woman would say, I feel better or I don't. We would do this for maybe 20 minutes or a half hour. It's hard work. And it's not much glory. It's just hard work. But you're doing it for someone who appreciates it. And each time you do this, you learn how to get in there deeper and quicker. And then finally you get so you recognize when you've made a hit. Something happens that you can know in yourself. You can't describe it well to anybody, but it's happened. Something turns over, and you know the work is done. A hero has a problem work on it until the problem is no longer there. That means it isn't all just 1 3-minute healing like Joel says. It may be for Joel, but for the people who are learning healing, you may have to come back 2 times, 3 times, twice in one day. Finally, you get to the place where you don't need anyone to tell you what you've done. You can know the person is healed or is not. And it's all how you feel inside yourself. The freedom has come. And by the time you're finished, you're really wound up and you're in a position to go deeper. So then we would usually just not sign off and go back to what we were doing, but we would think of someone else who has a problem, or maybe some problem that we ourselves might have. Stay in it and deepen and deepen and deepen. Even when you come out later, you're a different person. This is how you build a healing technique. And it's surprising how it works. It penetrates to the place where the person who is healed knows that has happened. Where did it go? I don't know. I have no pain. There's no time limit. You stay as long as you can, as long as you want to. The idea is to get the person healed. But there's got to be a substance in your meditation. And you feel that. When Jesus healed the woman in the coma, she was a high soul. And after he healed her, we only know that she went back to living. We don't know what she did after that. But there was nothing that could help her in all of the kingdom, and the meditation did. Because in the meditation, something in the meditator reaches something in the girl, not a thought, not an idea. It's a spiritual substance. And they come together and exchange, become one. She's better. And what he is doing really is feeding her spirit. He's feeding her spirit. And when her soul reaches out for the spirit he feeds her, she receives it with her soul. And the spiritual awareness in her soul removes the error or the pain or the problem. You see how it becomes easier to stay there now? This becomes a part of your arsenal. A wise person, when they develop this capacity, will go into it more than once during the day, whether he has someone to work for or not. And he'll rest there until he becomes, the word I use is pregnant, because you feel something happening. You feel some pregnancy. Something is sparked alive that wasn't. And in this inner spiritual pregnancy, you are a suitable instrument for the Spirit, and anyone who calls you, sometimes they hear instantly. Now, it's possible to start out knowing nothing, just being excited and being flustered, and in 5 years or 5 months, you've got a technique of how to do it. People call you and it's quite easy. I'll take care of it. That's all you say, I'll take care of it. And then you get into meditation, that's all you do. Get into the silence. If you've been there during the day, at times it helps. You get into the silence, rest in the Word, and the Word is sweet and gentle. People can come out of the strangest things. Some people meditate without anybody needing any help, just to keep it trim, keep it going, 2 or 3 times a day. And what you're also doing this way is keeping yourself free so that you are not affected. I've known practitioners who get sick, but as a rule, the practitioner is able to take care of his own sickness. He doesn't have to go anywhere. Another thing I think it does is to prolong your life activity. The practitioners I know are a little older, and they're aging nicely. There's something about it that soothes you down. Now, you don't try to use this for any self-gain. You don't try to meditate up a good stock. Some people do, you know. You don't use it for betting. Which one should I bet on? This is used for healing those who need healing. But you can also meditate for yourself on things. And it's not a specific, but it's a establishing a level so that you're in the flow, and this flow is what you give and receive from everyone. And it's amazing how it sorts things out for you. While you're in the flow, life seems to be more purposeful, more resultful. So I recommend it for those who have a restlessness, those who can't quite center on anything to do. It'll generally stabilize your being. Give you a general tone. It's very helpful on an infant who doesn't even know that you're in that state. Many people use the ability to be quiet to heal the weather. I know some startling cases where the weather was healed this way. One is in the Bible. You might experiment with your ability to put this into practice, to change the complexion of things that you face day in and day out. You might find that it is a very, very important pacifier. It gets you nice and quiet, gets you to a point where things don't irritate you as much. You're better humored. And it does big things. I'm talking about all the things you can do for yourself with this capacity. It really does big things. You see, you're in the spirit, and the spirit is flowing out. You're not in the mind. The mind isn't going back and forth. Believe it or not, I've seen the whole group of cows put to sleep this way. Well, I think we've had enough meditation, but I'd like to recommend that you bring it into daily practice in your life as a soul soother. It really is good for you to be in peace, and meditation is one way to get there. And then when you may find that you don't know why you're feeling as well as you do, you trace it perhaps to the meditations you've been having. And when you find that I don't seem to have these flare-ups that I have, you trace it again to that. You find that the ability to establish a tone for your being and to maintain it just by an occasional remembrance that all I have to do is take 2 minutes to maintain. You find it harder to get angry. Stabilizes your temperament. These are some of the lesser things that it does. Now, it may surprise you that you can apply it to quite big things. If you know there's a war going on and you have an interest in it, you can meditate it away. I've seen storms meditated away. I've seen waves meditated away. If a man meditates correctly, the waves respond.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button below. It really helps us out. And why not share this video with your friends? Spread the word and help us reach more people. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video from us. Thanks for watching and see you next time.